Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cord Connects. My name is Moshe Weizberg. I am from Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. I am also the immediate past president of Cord. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Cord for inviting me to present today. And I hope this will be useful for all of you. Firstly, I would like to thank Bo Burns, who worked on this lecture together with me. Unfortunately, Bo had a family emergency and he wasn't able to join today. So I will be presenting for the both of us. But Bo put a lot of work into this presentation together with me. By way of background, Bo and I are both former program directors and both Cord board members. And we also both completed an MBA program a few months ago. And we were talking a lot about some of the lessons we learned in business school and how we could apply that to residency leadership and what valuable tools or pearls we can apply over. And one of the things that we came up with was in one of the courses that we both took in our respective business schools, they talk a lot about how to recruit the right employees. As you can imagine, businesses are very interested in hiring the correct employees for their jobs, and they do a tremendous amount of research into that topic. And we thought maybe we can look at some of the lessons we learned from the business side of how to identify a good employee and see if we can apply that to identifying who would be a great resident. And as we go through that today, we'll see if we can use some of those lessons to help us as we're starting our next recruiting season. It's that time of year when residents are graduating, a new class of residents are starting, and that also means that there's a whole new class of students who are coming to our doors asking about emergency medicine. And as we start this process of trying to select our next class of residents, maybe some of these tools can help us along the way. So there are a couple of areas we're going to talk about today. The first one is attitudes. There are 4 specific attitudes that have been identified in the business literature as being predictive of success. The next is going to be personality traits. And here there are 5 personality traits that are associated with success in business. And finally, which are the personality traits you want to absolutely avoid because they never end well? So firstly, attitudes. There are 4 big attitudes that in the business research have been demonstrated to correlate with success in work, and therefore business leaders will look for these attitudes in their employees. And maybe we can do the same when we're looking to recruit residents. The first attitude is job involvement, and job involvement may not be self-explanatory. What it means in this context is how important does the employee believe what they are doing is to the world? Do they think what they're doing in their job actually matters? For us, that means, does our prospective emergency medicine resident believe that being an emergency medicine doctor is an important thing to society? And how much do they value it? And the reason why job involvement is important is because it has been demonstrated that employees who have high levels of job involvement, meaning they believe what they're doing really is important, they demonstrate higher organizational citizenship behaviors, which means they do the things that are not necessarily the integral part of their job, but are also things they just have to get done, like their paperwork. For us, this would mean logging duty hours, getting your procedure log in. Similarly, employees who are strong in job involvement also do better on performing tasks. So for us, that would mean that our residents would be better at doing procedures, managing their patients, doing the things that they're required to do. If you want to try to maximize the job involvement in the employees, or in our case, residents that you already have, these are some of the things that have been demonstrated to increase job involvement in your employees. Give them autonomy. So as your residents progress from first year to second year and then higher, give them more opportunity to do things on their own. Allow them to make those decisions on their own. Have them be a part of the plan of what you're going to do for the patient. This will help them feel that they are the ones who are actually managing those patients, and what they're doing really contributes to the patient's care. And probably the most important thing for us as residency leaders is giving feedback has been correlated with increased job involvement, which means the more feedback we give to our employees, to our residents, the more they feel importance in what they're doing. So we should definitely pay attention to that. The next attitude that has been associated with success in business is organizational commitment. And this means, how much does your prospective resident identify with what your department and your hospital are trying to achieve? Every hospital has its own unique little culture. Every department, every residency program has its own feel. And how well does this prospective resident identify with what you're trying to do in your department? And residents, employees who have strong organizational commitment, they're less likely to leave. They're less likely to leave their job, in this case, less likely to leave your program. They're less likely to call out sick. They're less likely to miss a shift. So this is something that's valuable to us in our residency programs. And again, ways that we can increase our organizational commitment among our residents is by doing more social activities. We're great at this in emergency medicine. We love to plan activities for our residents, to do fun things, to take them on exciting days. These things actually contribute to organizational commitment. When our residents are involved in these team building activities and they do things together as a group, they feel more connected to each other and to the program. Attitude number 3 is perceived organizational support. This one is on us. This means, how well do our residents believe that we care about them and we want to do everything to help them succeed? Because if residents believe that we are committed to them, we care about them, and we value them, they are going to provide better service. In the business world, it means better customer service. For us, this can translate to a better patient experience, better bedside manner, better Press Ganey scores. And if you want to work on improving the organizational support of your employees, of your residents, give them resources that show you're committed to them. Give the residents things they need. For residents, it's often food or time, or just knowing that you actually care about them because you're spending time talking to them, counseling them, being there for them, giving them the schedule requests that they need. By contributing these things to your residents, that will help improve their perceived organizational support. They will realize, wow, my program actually does care about me, and that results in better performance. Finally, the 4th attitude that correlates with strong performance at work is employee engagement. This means, how well does your employee feel they look every day? One of the ways that employees feel like they're engaged in their job is when they start to learn new skills. This is a gold mine for us in a residency because we're teaching new skills all the time. We're always giving our residents new skills, allowing them to learn and practice new procedures, teaching them cutting-edge medicine. This is where we have an opportunity to really contribute and improve our residents' employee engagement. And we know by doing that, that's going to result in them having a better performance. They're less likely to leave, lower turnover among employees, by us, less residents leaving your program going somewhere else. And again, better task performance. They will do a better job if they know that they feel like you are engaged with them. One great way for a leader to do this is by leading by example and setting that tone for everyone. And this is referred to as affective contagion. When you as a leader have a positive affect, it spreads to everyone around you. And if you are that beacon of light for your residents and for your program, they are going to pick up on that positive feel. They are going to pick up on that vibe, and they are also going to be happy in the job that they do. One important thing to keep in mind is improving our residents' employee engagement does not mean that we have to compromise our standards. It does not mean that it's okay to come late to a shift. It does not mean that it's okay for residents to not be doing the things that they need to do. No, we need to be tough-minded on the standards. You need to be on time to your shift. You need to complete your duty hour log. You need to log your procedures. But at the same time, we're soft on the people. We care about you. We talk to them as a person. We're committed to what's important to them. So those are the 4 big attitudes that have been associated with success in business. And perhaps we can adopt that to residency as well. If we can identify residents when we're interviewing them, when we're reviewing their applications, who possess these 4 attitudes, we know they are going to make great residents for us. We also want to look at their personality traits. This is another area that has been studied extensively in business. And they have found 5 particular personality traits that are associated with increased performance. These 5 traits are things we can look for in our residents when we're interviewing them to see if they will be great residents in our program. Number 1 is the personality trait of openness. And what this means is how curious are they about the world around them and how open are they to new experiences? This really matters for us in a residency because their entire residency is going to be about new experiences. It's going to be about new patient presentations. It's going to be about new literature. It's going to be about new procedures that they may not be comfortable with. And if they have a strong desire to learn more about the things around them, they're going to want to learn more about what they need to learn in residency. They will learn more and they will perform better. And that's ultimately what we want. Personality trait number 2 is conscientiousness. This also is associated with improved performance. And this means how much does that resident feel like they are responsible about things? How well do they want to succeed? How much do they want to excel? Because employees who have a high level of conscientiousness have better job performance. Of the 5 personality traits, this is the one that actually is the most predictive of job performance. So if you can find the resident who is very conscientious, you know they're going to do well in their job. However, nothing is perfect. Someone who is too conscientious can often run into some trouble. They can run out of energy and they can start to lose some of that drive that they've had before. And in business, when they've done studies looking at people who score very, 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 very high on the conscientiousness scale, and they compare them to those who are above average, the people who are extremely conscientious don't do any better than those who are above average. So it's important to find the people who are above average on the conscientiousness scale, but not necessarily too extreme, because that can be actually a negative predictor. The third personality trait that is associated with success is extroversion. And what this means in this context is how comfortable are these people in social settings? We know in emergency medicine, we are meeting new people every single day. And those people are not in a good mood. They're not in a good place. They didn't choose to come to an emergency department that day, but rather they're here because they need to be. And they're not necessarily at their best. They're not feeling well. They may be in pain. They may not be at the top of their game. But we have to develop a relationship with them and get them to trust us in a matter of seconds. And if you can identify the resident who has those kind of social skills, that they can develop those relationships, they're going to succeed. In fact, in business, employees who have this ability to develop strong social bonds are more likely to develop leadership positions and end up running a company or leading someplace that's going to happen well in the business world. As we said with conscientiousness, too much of anything is not good either. In business, people who had too much extroversion were actually found to be more impulsive and may have made decisions a little too quickly. What does that mean for us in an emergency department? Someone who is going to be too extroverted and too impulsive may look at a patient and say, "Oh, you're not sick. I know there's nothing wrong with you," before really getting a detailed history and before really paying attention to some of those lab results or abnormal vital signs that are lurking in the background to warn us that things are going on. So here too, we want to find the person who has the right amount of extroversion, but not necessarily too much. The fourth personality trait that has been associated with success in business is agreeableness, which means to get along with other people. And you may want to think about this as the corollary of systems-based practice. We know in emergency departments, we work with other people and other roles and other parts of the healthcare system every single day. And the resident who has the ability to get along with those people, who can get along with your surgical consults, as well as your nurses and your PCAs and your clerks and your EMS providers and everybody else that they're going to interact with throughout their shift, that's someone who is going to do incredibly well. Employees who do well, score well on the agreeableness scale, are better in customer service. Again, for us, patient experience, bedside manner. And again, those citizenship behaviors, getting those paperwork, getting that paperwork in, getting their duty hours logged, getting their procedures in, getting what they need in for their 6-month evals, all the things that we sometimes chase our residents around to do. If you find the resident who has this level of agreeableness, they're going to do this well. Again, too much may not be a good thing, When they look at employees who have a high level of agreeableness and they study them over time, sometimes they can get taken advantage of. Maybe they're more willing to agree to things or more willing to say yes. And in fact, over time, their earnings potential is actually lower. Maybe they don't negotiate as much for a higher salary. Maybe they're willing to take an earlier offer that comes their way just to be agreeable. So again, we want to find the right balance, the right amount of agreeableness, not too little, not too much. And finally, the last personality trait that has been associated with success is sometimes referred to as neuroticism, but this is really referring to emotional stability. How well can this applicant handle, can this employee, or in our case, this resident, handle a difficult situation? We all know working in an emergency department is stressful. Residency is stressful. And we want to identify the person who's going to be able to ride those waves very, very well. In fact, employees who have strong emotional stability have very high job satisfaction and less negative thinking. We want the resident who's going to come onto a shift being happy, being satisfied, and not the resident who's going to come onto a shift and start complaining about everything they see around them. And this area of emotional stability is what we're looking for. Here too much of a good thing may not be so good, because people who are very, 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 very emotionally stable may always need things to be okay. And when the outcome is not so good, they may not be able to adapt to it and handle it terribly well. There are going to be bad outcomes in emergency departments. Not every patient is going to get better, and some patients are going to get worse. And a resident who can handle that change and be able to adapt to any outcome the patient has is someone who is going to really succeed well. So, like we saw with these personality traits, having a healthy dose of them may be really, really helpful, but too much may be a bad thing. And we really want to find the person on the right area of this curve, the one who has the right amount of these personality traits to make them successful, not too little to not allow them to be successful, and also not too much that can perhaps backfire and lead to some negative consequences. So just like there are these 5 personality traits that have been associated with success in the business world, there are also a couple of personality traits that have been clearly associated with bad outcomes. And these are sometimes referred to as the dark triad, the 3 personality traits of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. What does this mean? We all have heard the term narcissist. What does it really mean? What it really means, at least in business literature, is someone who really centers only around themselves. They're extremely selfish and excessively self-loving, to an extreme, to the point where it's abnormal. They have tremendous views of their own talents, and they may be able to come into your 6-month eval and tell you that they've mastered everything and they're up to milestone 5 in this after 6 months of being an intern. And they're the greatest intubator you've ever met, and they can put in a central line in anyone because they have these grandiose views of their own talents. And this is something that has been associated with bad outcomes in business. These are people who always want to be admired, and they can't empathize well with others. We know in emergency medicine, empathy is something we always need to be able to demonstrate. And people who are extreme in having this personality trait of narcissism won't be able to do that properly, because anyone who doesn't love them, they write them off. They're going to hate that person. Narcissism is correlated with deviance. So someone who has these personality traits is more likely to do things like lie and cheat and steal. And this is not the kind of thing we want to have that's going to generate positive will in our programs. When they look at narcissistic leaders in businesses and they have them rate their own leadership abilities, they score themselves very, 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 very high. But when their own supervisors were asked to rate them, not so much. They have a grander view of how well they're doing and may not have the insight to recognize what others perceive in them. And this is one of my favorite studies that we reviewed during business school on this topic. And this was a research study that looked at CEOs and tried to grade them on how narcissistic they were, and then look at what they practiced in their businesses in terms of business acquisitions and how well they did. So imagine designing this study, right? How do you define how narcissistic a CEO is or not? And the way a lot of the business literature does this is some of these items. They look at their annual report and see how big is the picture that the CEO puts in of themselves. When they report what their business is up to, how often are they saying, I did this and I did that and I created this and I achieved that, versus what we did as a group. And they also look at how much or how not so much they pay their employees. And CEOs that had very, very big pictures and talked about themselves a lot and used the first person about themselves were graded very high on the narcissistic level. And then they look to see how well these people did in performance in their businesses. And what they found was that CEOs who scored high on the narcissism scale were more likely to make big acquisitions and pay a lot of money for some of those acquisitions for their business. And then when some of those things started to get some traction in the media and they would report, look at this company and look at the acquisition they made, it fueled them more. And they went and bought even more big acquisitions. But when they looked to see how well these acquisition purchases actually panned out for the company, it didn't actually do very well. And some of them were quite volatile and often they lost substantially. So again, having a little bit of narcissism is necessary to be a successful CEO, but too much is going to lead to trouble in business. Same thing I think applies in emergency medicine residency. You want somebody who has a little bit of self-confidence or the right amount of self-confidence, but a resident who thinks only of themselves and not anybody else, we know exactly how that story is going to end in our residencies. It's not going to be pretty. One of the best parts of these, looking through these personality traits, is every single one of us is now diagnosing one of our residents. We know somebody who was like this, we know somebody who was like that, and we know how the story ended in their residency, how well or how not well it went. The second of the dark triad is Machiavellianism. And this, in this context, means that they believe everything they do should be about their own self-benefit. And where they differ from the narcissist is Machiavellians believe it's okay to help other people, but only if it's going to benefit me at the same time. And these are people who are willing to do anything they want, anything they need to succeed and get ahead and get the office that they're looking for, get the position that they're looking for. This is the resident who's going to step on other people, who's going to interfere with others and not allow them to succeed because they want to be the chief resident or they want to get a certain award, and they're going to do it at the expense of others. This is another personality trait you want to avoid when looking for your residents. These people tend to have a lot of things that we may not love in our fellow workers. They tend to lie. They tend to manipulate. These are the kind of people who are going to generate complaints from their fellow residents. They're going to come to your office and say, this person is trying to accomplish A, B, and C at the expense of everybody else. And these also are people who tend to have low levels of empathy, which of course is not something we want while we're taking care of patients in an emergency department. And finally, the last of the dark triad is the psychopath. This is the one we're always worried about on interviews, right? This is the person we're trying to identify. The psychopath is someone who really does not care about other people. And when something goes wrong and they've done something that leads to harm of a patient, they actually don't have any remorse. So you've heard people ask questions on an interview, things like, tell me about a bad experience you were involved with. And this is one of the things they're looking for. They want to see if the applicant will demonstrate appropriate remorse about a bad attitude, about a bad outcome. Are they going to feel bad about a patient that didn't do well? Or are they going to be very nonchalant about it? Avoid that person as much as you possibly can. These are people who are going to see no limit in achieving what they want, even if it means hurting others. They're going to threaten others. They're going to manipulate. They're going to bully their other residents just to get what they want and get the schedule request that they want and get the procedure that they want and get the shift that they want. These are people you really want to try to avoid in your program. Now, it's hard to identify all of these things. These are some clues and warning signs that have been identified in some business schools about how to identify some of these dark triads. We've all seen some of these traits in some of the people we know. Sometimes it's in our own residents, sometimes it's in applicants, sometimes it's in colleagues, sometimes it's outside of work. And we know how much or how little we appreciate when people are behaving this way. If you identify some of these things on interview day, you may want to look elsewhere. So let's try to put this all together. Attitudes, personality traits, and the dark triad. Remember the 4 attitudes that are associated with success in business, and let's apply them to our residency recruitment. Job involvement. Do they believe what they're doing is important to the world? Look for that resident, rank them high, get them on your rank list, get them to love your program, get them to want to come. Are they committed to their organization? Do they believe what your program represents? Do they buy into your values? Do they agree with what you're trying to accomplish in your residency, in your department, in your hospital? Perceived organizational support, that's on us. Let's make sure we're letting our residents know how much we value them and how much we care about them, and we'll do whatever we can to help them achieve their goals. And employee engagement. Does this applicant look to you as someone who's going to be paying attention to what they're doing and feel good about their job? The 5 personality traits you want to look for in your resident applicants. How open are they to other experiences in the world? How conscientious are they about their responsibilities? Do they have good social skills, and can they interact with other people? Are they agreeable? Can they work well with others from other departments and other areas of the hospital? And finally, how much emotional stability do they have? Can they tolerate the difficult times we're all going to encounter in the emergency department? And finally, beware of the dark 3. Try to stay away from the psychopath, the narcissist, the Machiavellinist. These are people who are going to be poisonous to our residency and are going to bring everyone around us down. If we can avoid these and focus on the positive, we are going to recruit some of the best classes we've ever had. And we will be so excited to welcome in our new residents, because we know they are going to succeed in everything they do. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that was helpful. Happy to take any questions. Feel free to either unmute your mic or post them in the chat, and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you so much, Jenna. I'm sure some of you have had this experience, right? You know, you've had a resident who's had one of these personality traits, and you're thinking about them right now, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's so true. And as we think about it more and we try to adapt some of these findings to what we do in residency leadership, a lot of it really carries over. And I think there's a lot that we can really apply and try to make our classes as successful as can be. Okay, thank you all for the kind words. If there are no other questions, I will let you all go for the day. Thank you so much. I hope that was helpful for everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.